Tribunal at the receiving end. The International Tribunal is in the spotlight after US President Donald Trump imposed sanctions for investigation that threaten the national security of Washington and its allies, which include Israel. On February 26, 2025, US President Donald Trump signed an executive order imposing sanctions on the International Criminal Court, warning of tangible and significant consequences for those behind investigations deemed a threat to US national security and that of its allies, including Israel. This condemnation follows ICC Chief Prosecutor Karim A. Khan's decision to issue arrest warrants for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Defense Minister Gallant over alleged war crimes and crimes against humanity in the Gaza Strip. However, this is not Trump administration's first offensive against ICC. In June 2020, it sanctioned the ICC prosecutor Fatou Bensouda and a senior court officials that she launched an investigation into alleged war crimes by the US troops in Afghanistan. The Biden administration later rescinded the sanctions. The latest sanctions have prompted key member states such as UK, France, and Germany to reaffirm their unwavering support for the court. The ICC has always had the contentious relationship with the US, while President Bill Clinton's administration played a pivotal role in the negotiations that led to the court's creation. It remained wary of the emergence of an independent tribunal that Washington could not control through the UN Security Council. Although Mr. Clinton signed the Rome Statute, he did not send it to the Senate to be ratified, fearing security of US actions and those of its allies. When President George W. Bush took office, he launched a hostile campaign against the ICC. His administration pressured governments worldwide to sign bilateral agreements barring the surrender of US nationals to the court. He also enhanced the American Service Members Protection Act of 2002, which restricted the ICC's jurisdiction over the US military personnel. The law even authorized military action against the court, earning it the nickname the Hague Invasion Court. The US position on the ICC softened during the Mr. Bush second term, when he recognized its potential to serve American interests, particularly in regions where US nationals were unlikely to face prosecution, such as Africa. In 2005, his administration abstained from the UN Security Council vote granting the ICC jurisdiction over war crimes in Darfur, Sudan. This measured engagement continued under the Obama administration, with US diplomats attending ICC conferences. However, cooperation remained conditional as Washington made it clear that it would support only those investigations that align with US American interest. Under the Biden administration, Washington's double standards in its purported commitment to the rules-based international order lay bare when it endorsed the ICC's arrest warrant for Vladimir Putin, while denouncing as outrageous the one issued for Benjamin Netanyahu. In the aftermath of the Second World War, the Allied powers established the Nuremberg Trials Tribunal. The US position on ICC softened during Mr. Bush's second term when he recognized its potential to serve American interests, particularly in regions where US nationals were unlikely to face prosecution, such as Africa. His administration abstained from UNSC vote granting ICC jurisdiction over war crimes in Darfur, Sudan. This measured engagement continued under Obama administration. However, cooperation remained conditional as Washington made it clear that it would support only those investigations that aligned with American interest. Under Biden administration, Washington's double standards in its purported commitment to rules-based international order lay bare when it endorsed the ICC's arrest warrant for Vladimir Putin, while denouncing as outrageous the one issued for Benjamin Netanyahu. In the aftermath of the Second World War, Allied powers established the Nuremberg Tribunal, the first international war crimes tribunal to prosecute top Nazi officials. This gave birth to the idea of a permanent court to hold perpetrators accountable for the world's most egregious war crimes. Although the UN created ad hoc tribunals to prosecute war crimes in the former Yugoslavia and Rwanda, many international law experts consider them inadequate deterrents. In July 1998, UN General Assembly adopted ICC's founding treaty at the conference in Rome. Unlike the International Court of Justice, which adjudicates disputes between states, ICC prosecutes individuals. It complements national courts and intervenes only when they are unwilling or unable to act. A major challenge to its enforcement is the absence of its own police force. Despite its mandate, the ICC has struggled to gain the membership of major powers, including the US, China, and Russia. Some nations have even withdrawn. Burundi left in 2017 after the court decided to investigate its crackdown on opposition protest. In 2019, Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte pulled out, rejecting the ICC's inquiry into his war on drugs and insisting that domestic courts were sufficient to uphold the rule of law. African nations in particular have expressed discontent towards court's tendency to disproportionately target the continent. It was not until 2016 that the court opened an investigation outside Africa and Georgia, reinforcing perceptions of it being an instrument for advancing Western political interests. The ICC has also been criticized for focusing on low hanging fruit crimes, prosecuting warlords and rebel leaders while failing to hold senior political figures accountable. Perhaps the most damning criticism of the ICC is its perceived inability to hold the US and its allies accountable. By refusing to ratify the Rome Statute, the US has ensured that the courts lack jurisdiction over crimes committed in territory or by its military personnel. As a permanent member of the UN Security Council, it can also veto any attempt to initiate a referral through the Council. With the Trump administration in power, the court is staring down the barrel of 4 years of punitive measures from Washington. Whether it emerges as a meager shadow of itself or a resilient tribunal will depend on the resolve of its member states. Beyond external pressures, the court faces internal challenges that undermine its standing. Chief among them is the sharp decline in trials. This year, apart from delivering two verdicts, the court will oversee only single ongoing trial with no other cases expected to reach the trial stage. Its workload has also diminished significantly, with just 80 hearing days scheduled, a steep drop from the average 369 annual hearing days recorded over the past 8 years. Further complicating matters is the cloud of sexual harassment allegations against the ICC's chief prosecutor. In November 24, court's governing body announced an external investigation into the claims, deepening concerns over institutions' credibility. To preserve its legitimacy and public trust, the ICC must address these internal issues with unwavering transparency and accountability. The ICC has always had a contentious relationship with the US. The most damning criticism of the ICC also stems from perceived inability to hold the US accountable and its allies accountable. Despite its mandate, ICC has struggled to gain the membership of major powers including US, China, Russia. Some nations have even withdrawn from the body. African nations in particular have expressed discontent towards the court's tendency to disproportionately target the continent. Beyond external pressures, the court faces internal challenges that undermine its standing. Chief among them is the sharp decline in trials. This year, apart from delivering two verdicts, the court will oversee only a single ongoing trial. Port of contention. The tiny warm water port in Gulf of Oman, with minimal trade compared to Iran's main Bandar Abbas port, received a special mention in the Trump's memo. US President Donald Trump has taken aim at many countries around the world in few weeks of his presidency, with Iran being perhaps the most predictable target, much as it was during the first tenure. So while it came as no surprise when he issued a presidential security memorandum calling for maximum pressure on Iran As was he called the world's leading state sponsor of terrorism, his decision to name the Chabahar port in particular sent shockwaves through New Delhi. Chabahar Shahid Beheshti Port Terminal. Chabahar Shahid Beheshti Port Terminal is, after all, India's first international port. Its alternative trade route to Iran, Afghanistan, Central Asia, and beyond, and part of its plans for regional leadership. So, why does the tiny warm water port in Gulf of Oman, that does relatively little trade with the world compared to Iran's main Bandar Abbas port, merit a special mention in Trump's memo? And where could this lead? India has had an interest in developing a terminal for trade to bypass Pakistan's land route and Karachi port route. Chabahar not only provides a quick sea route from India's west coast, but the plan fits in the India's development assistance to Afghan Republic, especially through construction of Zaran's Delaram Highway in 2009 that could take Indian goods around the country. In India, in time, India could develop Chabahar as a counter to Pakistan's Gwadar port that is funded by China. In recent years, China showed its interest in Chabahar as part of a Belt and Road Initiative and signed a 25-year cooperation agreement in 21, which with a potential investment of $300 billion. Between 2010 and 2015, US encouraged India to increase energy contracts with Iran to build up Shahid Beheshti terminal at Chabahar and even to invest in a rail line connecting Chabahar to the Afghan border, as it wanted to use this as a leverage in its high-stakes negotiations for the Six Nation Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action on Iran's nuclear capabilities. The thinking for the US administration was that Indian investment would give Iran incentives to join the international mainstream with the JCPOA signed, but the best laid plans are often derailed by geopolitics. By the time Donald Trump was elected in 16, the US relations with Iran had soared and Mr. Trump walked out of JCPOA, enforcing sanctions on any country importing oil or trading with Iran. India submitted to the sanctions on oil and stopping its imports of cheaper Iranian crude in 2018, but it lobbied hard to keep its stake in Chabahar alive. In November 2018, the Trump administration decided to add waivers to US's Iran's Freedom and Counter-Proliferation Act, stipulating that all consignments through the Iranian ports were subject to sanctions except those meant for humanitarian aid for Iran and Afghanistan reconstruction. The waiver was welcomed by New Delhi and it spurred a new round of interest in Chabahar. Over the next few years, India's trade and aid through Chabahar grew, while the collapse of Ghani government and takeover by the Taliban reduced the US engagement. India has tried to force ties with the Taliban leadership through supply of aid. India also provided equipment worth $25 million, including six mobile harbor cranes, and developed the terminal at Chabahar during this time, albeit at a slower pace than Iran had hoped. In May 24, even as India was in throes of an election campaign, the Modi government sent shipping minister Sarbananda Sonowal to Tehran to sign a 10-year contract for Chabahar to invest approximately $120 million in equipment for the port and a credit window of $250 million. External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar extolled the agreement, indicating India wanted to connect its Chabahar port to the INSTC so as to trade with Central Asia and Russia, reminding India of the Afghanistan aid stipulation. The Biden administration said the plans carried the risk of sanctions but did not move on the implicit threat. Mr. Trump's latest memo brings the risk back into focus. Given that order came just days ahead of Prime Minister Narendra Modi's US visit, South Bloc officials hope they can once again negotiate for an exception for India's plans for Chabahar port. The question is what kind of bargain Mr. Trump wants to strike now that Chabahar is again in US crosshairs. Domestic interest, global cost, US aid. The humanitarian aid organization is the latest casualty of the reforms initiated by the US President Donald Trump and Department of Government Efficiency held by Elon Musk. Having returned to President's chair on January 20 and signing a spree of executive orders since Donald Trump announced a billionaire friend and advisor Elon Musk moved to freeze all foreign funding for 90 days. The ramifications of this top work or order was far-reaching, affecting countries as diverse as Syria, Thailand, Ukraine, and South Africa, where the USAID, United US Agency for International Development, US Agency for international development, the country's premier humanitarian aid agency was actively involved. Not stopping at that, the US President, along with Mr. Musk, who heads the Department for Government Efficiency, has sought to tighten the chokehold by trimming the USAID's 10,000 strong workforce to mere 294, a move temporarily put on hold by the court on Friday. In between, senior officials at the USAID were placed on leave following a run in with Mr. Musk Doge, an organization whose ambit of power remains sketchy after it sought access to sensitive information. The USAID's website went dark and its Washington office was locked, leaving employees to protest outside. The original plan of the Trump Musk duo for the USAID involved shutting it down, a position previously stated by Tesla founder. What we have is just a ball of worms. You have got to basically get rid of the whole thing. It's beyond repair. The next best outcome would be the absorption of USAID into the US State Department, a move driven by Secretary of State Marco Rubio's takeover of the agency's acting director role after accusing it of some insubordination. To justify their actions, the trio had said the USAID's functioning does not align with President's America First policy. A statement put out by the White House has criticized the agency's $1.5 million grant to LGBT group in Serbia and $2.5 million assistance to an electric vehicle manufacturer in Vietnam. Separately, Mr. Trump has leveled allegations of corruption against USAID. He also accused the USAID of shipping $50 million worth of condoms to Gaza, where they were being repurposed as bombs. Guardian fact check report found that US did not ship contraceptives anywhere in West Asia except for Jordan. However, the fact of the matter is US remains the largest contributor of foreign aid. Despite the amount not being highest in terms of the fraction of country's annual budget, 0.6% of 6.75 trillion, the US aid is the primary source of that assistance. Of the 68 billion spent by the country on international aid, the US aid accounted for $40 billion. The agency has operated in 30 countries. It takes care of education of schoolgirls in Taliban-ruled Afghanistan while monitoring of Ebola and the outbreak in Uganda. It is also responsible for PFAR, an HIV/AIDS control program that began under President George Bush and is credited with saving more than 20 million lives in Africa. Of late, agency's primary focus has been on Ukraine, where it buys produce from farmers and sells it in other parts of the world. It also provides prosthetic limbs to soldiers. It boasts a famine prevention program that can predict crises in regions. In India, an agency works in areas such as health, education, sanitation, and environment. USAID was established in established in 1961 by Democratic President John F. Kennedy during the Cold War era to counter Russian influence. While it functioned under the State Department initially, Congress made it an independent agency in 1998. Hence, experts say the power to dissolve USAID rests with the Congress. The US has benefited from this independent stature, for it could maintain bridges with the non-friendly nations such as Iran and North Korea, where the agency undertook humanitarian work. However, the public in the US, mainly Republicans, have always sided with slashing foreign spending. As Mr. Musk and Mr. Trump chip away at the US aid with the acumen of two businessmen, cutting costs and trimming the flag, experts say China will step in to fill the void left by the agency. But China's priority has so far been visible programs or infrastructure projects. it undertakes in the form of the BRI. These can never supplant the US aid. Sadly, the price for Trump's administration domestic interests end up being paid by the deprived people across the globe. Trump revokes Biden's security clearance in a set of new orders. President Donald Trump on Friday revoked his predecessor's Joe Biden's security clearance in a blizzard of new orders. There is no need for Joe Biden to continue receiving access to classified information, Mr. Trump said on Truth Social Network. Joe, you are fired, he added in all caps. Trump's talk, Trump's talk of making Canada a US state a real thing. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau on Friday said President Donald Trump's talk of making Canada 51st US state is a real thing and is linked to the country's rich natural resources. They are very aware of our resources and of what we have and very much want to be able to benefit from those. German Chancellor slams Trump's demand for Ukrainian rare earth. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz slammed as selfish and self-serving Donald Trump's demand for Ukrainian rare earth in exchange for US military aid. In an interview on Saturday, Ukraine is under attack and we are helping it without asking to be paid in return. This should be everyone's position. Lebanon Premier Nawaf Salam names new government vows reform. Lebanon has formed on Saturday its full-fledged government since 2022, led by Prime Minister Nawaf Salam. 24-member cabinet, evenly split between Christian and Muslim sects, was formed after weeks of negotiations. Mr. Salam aims to implement financial reform and oversee post-war reconstruction. Trump signs order to cut funding for South Africa. Judge orders temporary halt to dismantling US aid. Judge Carl Nichols blocked the Trump administration from placing US aid workers on leave. Some workers abroad has been cut from the government communication systems needed for emergencies. Hamas frees three more Israeli hostages under Gaza truce. Iran's Khamenei meets top Hamas leaders in Tehran. Rwandan Congolese leaders meet over eastern DRC conflict, call for ceasefire. Three Baltic states disconnect from Soviet-era power grid. Estonia, Latvia and Lithuania and Russia were officially severed on Saturday morning after officials switched off Soviet-era grids transmission lines and prepared to join the rest of Europe on Sunday. Electric elephant breaks cover. The Kumbara temple of Trishur has refrained from using live elephants in its rituals since 2015, citing exorbitant cost and suffering endured by captive elephants. BJP sweeps capital. BJP bags 48 seats, set to return to power in Delhi after 2 decades. AAP wins only 22 seats. Arvind Kejriwal and Manish Sisodia lose. Congress fails to win any seat for the third consecutive time. BJP scores big win in UP Milkipur by poll. Fadnavis deputy CMs have defrauded women. DMK roams home in Erode by poll. Nag debars varsity in AP for 5 years. PM promises to make Delhi a modern city. Reserve Bank is in sync with governments on growth focus. US judge blocks data access to Musk's team. With the Reserve Bank of India following the budget's demand stimulus for slowing economy with a long-awaited interest rate cut, Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman said on Saturday that fiscal and monetary policy working in harmony to spur growth impulses should yield a bigger boost to the economy. The minister was speaking to the media after addressing the RBI Central Board in the capital. The government's expected India's tepid private investment tends to reverse, Ms. Sitharaman indicated, citing anecdotal inputs from industry leaders after the budget that have unveiled income tax breaks worth 1 lakh crore to jumpstart urban demand. Industry was clearly showing signs of consumption recovery, she said. While whether it is inflation or growth, monetary policy and fiscal policy moving in tandem like two wheels of a car will definitely provide more benefit to our economy and people. With the RBI's decision, I am so sure that together things can move in the required direction that we need. Double engine rolls into Delhi. This time, BJP changed its strategy as it targeted the AAP leadership over governance, excise policy, and CM's house innovation instead of parties' welfare schemes like free power and electricity. A neck and neck fight with little differences in vote share percentages. AAP Sisodia lost by 675 votes to BJP's Marwa. Delhi debate marks the start of AAP's downfall in Punjab opposition as BJP surges. Alliance partners failed to keep up. NAC debars University in AP for 5 years from accreditation. After Delhi, BJP hopeful of turning tide in Bengal. Delhi wanted charge of says Delhi wanted change, says Priyanka Vadra. People cast their votes for good politics, Naidu. 500 crore fund given gives autonomy for national mission on manuscripts. Allocation over the next 6 years to be done through special committee. It is not clear if the Gyan Bharatam mission announced in the budget will be part of the National Manuscripts Mission or a separate entity. Steps have been initiated to make the National Manuscripts Mission for Manuscripts autonomous, with Center allocating nearly 500 crore for the nearly 6 years separately to the institution through a special finance committee. The NNM was established in February 2003 by the Ministry of Tourism and Culture, a unique project in its program and mandate. The mission seeks to unearth, preserve vast manuscript wealth of India. From this year, the NNM has been again under a central sector scheme. For central sector schemes, all initiatives are wholly sponsored by central agencies. NNM was still funding as part of the Indira Gandhi National Center for the Arts, but for January to March, the funds for this institution were routed through Sahitya Academy. The Special Finance Committee has allocated amount of 491 crore to till body till 2031. However, it was not clear whether the Gyan Bharatam mission for manuscripts announced in the Union Budget last week would be a part of NMM or a separate entity. According to the budget, the Gyan Bharatam mission intends to cover more than 1 crore manuscripts. It would undertake survey, documentation, and conservation of India's manuscript heritage, lying with academic institutions, museums, libraries, and private collectors. Hindu reported in October that Central Cultural Ministry was set to revive and relaunch the NMM, and was mulling formation of autonomous body to help preserve ancient texts. The NMM has documented around 5.2 million manuscripts across the country. It has conserved 90 million folios of manuscripts and digitized 3.5 lakh manuscripts that contain 3.5 crore pages. Mohan Manji government announces unified pension scheme. The Mohan Manji government has announced unified pension scheme for the government employees in Odisha. Owner of firecracker factory in Bengal held president's speech became a mere formality. PM's response rhetoric exercise. Samna. CM deputy CMs have defrauded women in Maharashtra. As government declared 5 lakh women ineligible for Ladki Bahin Yojana. Mithuns get a glow up for road safety. The semi-wild bovines of Arunachal Pradesh will soon wear fluorescent collars and that are visible enough for vehicle drivers on the highways. UPSC extends last date to apply for civil services exam. Capital gains for BJP. Freebies, governance and more. Key lessons and impact of Delhi's election. Delhi verdict, a referendum on Arvind Kejriwal's politics of deception. Delhi is the trailer, Bihar yet to come, said Jitan Ram Manjhi. Liquor policy, focus on money, drowned up Anna Hazare. After Delhi poll debacle, challenges increase for India Bloc Congress. Interest rate cut, tax stimulus to revive demand investments. Non-durables order books are rising for the first quarter. Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman said on Saturday, citing industry feedback, new surrender value norms may impact insurance for all goal. LG to invest 650 crore to integrate operations. BHEL backs 8,000 crore order from Mahagenco. Tata Motors launch vehicle scrapping facility at Guwahati. NCLT directs NCLT to decide on BCCI Byju's deal in first week. Tata Power's Odisha Discoms show is a model for states. Zoom seeking to expand far beyond video conferencing. Government moves roadmap for local aerospace manufacturing. Later onset menopause linked to lower heart disease. Heart failure patients in India die 10 years earlier study. How do bacteria resist antibiotics? Blood power tours. How are salamanders able to take off stick their landing with ease? Researchers use nose bacteria to sneak drugs with mice brain, identifying people with COPD by low-cost genetic samples. Chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, trying riveting cycles, increased soil CO2 release. So that's all for today. See you in the next one.